All right, let's get into how do we actually do Kanban. Again, this is basically chapter 2, the quick start guide to Kanban. Um, First step, and I'm gonna actually put the steps in a bit different order than chapter 2 because what works in a book doesn't work as well in a lecture format. So step 1 though is the same, and Kanban says the first thing that you should be doing is to determine your team's workflow. So how is it that work is processed by the team? What are the steps that work goes through? And we can use Kanban basically for any project. Doesn't have to be software, but any software team, they can have their own sort of workflow. And in fact, while we're going to show a linear workflow here, it's actually, I would think it'd be really feasible to actually have branching workflows and other things, but let's keep it simple. So the example from the book, and which works really well for software, as follows. To have a workflow basically is, the first thing on the far left is you're going to take things from your backlog. So there's a pile of work that needs to be done. That pile of work is prioritized. We're going to take items from it in priority order. Next, a common workflow is to specify the work that's necessary to implement, the backlog item. Or we could say the backlog story, if it's a user story, okay? So what is all of that work that we're going to do? So this is break into tasks. Tasks, this is, drawings, diagrams, all sorts of stuff. This is where we spend our time figuring out how is it they're going to build it. The stories, they're just sitting here in the backlog. They're not spec'd in any great detail yet. When they get here, they get blown out and fleshed out in great detail. So at Microsoft, this is what a program manager's job would be. And you got a story, users able to do the following. All right, what's that really look like? Okay, they get into that and figure that all out. And then we move on to implement it. So time for the software developers or the software design engineer at Microsoft, the SDE. So this is PM, program manager work. This is SDE work, software design engineer work. So it's time to implement that. Write the code, write unit tests, things like that. Then it goes to a validate stage. All right, so this is software design engineer and testing or other testers. So go to the validate stage. We're going to make sure here that you really did get it all built correctly. And then we basically deliver it to the customer. All right, that's a typical software workflow. Looks an awful lot like the waterfall, except it's not take everything from the backlog, specify it all, implement it all, validate it all, deliver it. And it's not like Scrum that's going to break it up into a sprint where, we'll take a chunk of it from the backlog, specify it, implement it, make sure it's good, deliver it by the end of the sprint, not a little mini waterfall. This is going to turn into, it's just work items, stories, flow through here and get delivered. All right. So that's the basic thing. So by the way, these tasks, let's see, do I get to that in? Yeah, so these tasks, I'll just mention it here. in the real world, this is, you might say these are 1 to 2 days or something that might be less than a week or whatever. It depends on the scale that the team is working at, but the normal notion is that the tasks should all be roughly about the same size, because Kanban is going to basically monitor its progress and be able to make estimates when things are done based upon number of tasks. And so the tasks should be approximately the same size as created by the people specifying them, the program managers. All right. So for step 2, I'm going to skip ahead and say, well, you figured out what your workflow is, but what we need to do is we do need to talk about at each of these stages, what does it mean to be able to go from one stage to the next stage? So step 2 is we need to define what done is for each step. What do we believe as a team will allow us to move something from one column to the other? By the way, this is the same notion that we have talking about the done criteria. In Scrum, we might very well, again, have a very simple, we've got a sprint backlog, we've got, so that's to do, then we've got in progress, and then we've got done. Well, what do we say it needs to be in the done column? We have a done criteria as a team. Here, we make sure that every single step has a done criteria. So here are some examples that people can have for these steps. So specify, again, you're going to produce these tasks. This is, I said 1 to 2 days. So that's what I would try to do, but it might just be these have to be less than a week. So I think these teams are used to working on a slightly longer scale time, because already if you were Scrum, you'd be like, or XP, you'd be like, oh, I need to be doing things in 1 to 2 weeks. So I need to really break things up in small. I think these teams are a little bit more comfortable working at a larger scale because they got rid of sprints. Okay. But they still break it down by the stories, these key feature items, and prioritize them. So it's still much more granular than Waterfall ever was. So you do these tasks, and I would, this idea of quick specs. So rather than a gigantic detailed spec, because again, that is the only thing that lives, you can do your specification faster with less details, because you're going to you might collaborate with people. You might very well bring in some of the developers who are doing the implementation and talk with them as well. That slows them down, but they're not there all the time. So you're going to use whiteboards. And so Eric Bruckner mentions that, often they'll take pictures, they'll do work, spec everything out like on whiteboard, collaborate, and then put pictures in OneNote, rather than sit there and write a detailed document all by themselves. There's, plus other descriptions of the work. It really is it's spec'd enough to be able to be implemented. It doesn't have to be spec'd enough that in 6 months later we'll understand what we're talking about. It's spec'd in the moment that we understand it well enough to implement it. And so that saves time and effort. Usually with Waterfall, because it's going to be so long before you actually get to some of the features, they have to be detailed beyond belief. Here, we've figured it out and we've talked about it, and we're all in the midst of it. And so we understand what we're going to build, and we have a better shared understanding. We don't need as much detail written down. All right, so the implement stage. Implement stage, you might have things like, you have to have your code reviewed by someone. You need to have your unit testing. The list goes on and on and on and on. There's actually a lot that you might say before we let someone pass it over to the validate stage. In the validate stage, though, this is where it goes through full testing. It can also, for live websites, have the notion of a test deploy to a subset of users. So, yep, we're going to let, 1,000 users have access to it when they come in. None of the other users see these new features. And we monitor and we see if there are bug reports and other sorts of stuff. And see if the servers, slow down, have problems, whatever. If that's successful, then we can do a full deployment, which is basically it's done and deliver it. So you can sort of work offline, or you can actually use some of your users to help you test things. The big thing here at the validate stage, though, is that any issues that are found must be resolved before you're allowed to say it's done. This is real common is, this is the quality check. It's not, we are not allowing it to be deployed and be available to all the customers until we really feel that it is bug-free, basically. So it's going to get stuck at this stage. All right. So what do we do next? Well, we've got our steps in our workflow. We've figured out what does it mean to be able to allow us to move from one step to the next step. Next, we need to figure out what limits are we going to place on how much work is allowed to be in progress at each stage. Okay, so our step 3 is to determine work in progress limits for each step of the workflow. All right, so in the book gives some all sorts of basic, it's not that hard, but the simplest way to think about this is just you're going to initially set your work in progress. So this is abbreviated WIP, your work in progress, to the number of team members assigned to the step multiplied by 1.5 and round up. Plus, so if you've got 1 times 1.5, that's equal to 1.5, which takes you to 2 when you round it up. 2 times 1.5 is 3. You don't need to round it up. Okay, so this is the work in progress limits for 2 people. Okay, so there's a little bit of leeway built into, the idea is there's a little bit of leeway built into the system. The notion is that yes, there would be 1 item per person normally. You're going to see once we get to this that there needs to be a little bit of wiggle room allowed for the work in progress limits. Okay. All right, step 4. Let's actually see some of this now. Let's make our Kanban board. So step 4, make your board. All right, so our board, we go far left of backlog. All right. Then we have our specify step. And we have our implement step. And we have our validate step. Okay. Then we're going to put in whatever our work in progress limits are. And on the last column, it's shifted over to the left, and here it's centered. We then divide these columns into two. And the left-hand side of the column are our active pieces of work, and the right-hand side are the done pieces of work. Okay. Now what is this work in progress, and how does it relate to this? So work in progress is going to be, is going to tell us the total number of cards. And we're going to use sticky notes or cards, just like in Scrum, in our Scrum board, that are allowed in active plus done. Okay, so that's why work in progress straddles both the active and the done column, because we're not going to allow more than whatever the work in progress limit is in both these, in the total of the columns. Invalidate, because this is the very last step. So whatever your workflow is with its last step, the work in progress limit is just for what's active, because there should be a gigantic pile eventually of stuff in done, because it's the end of the workflow. So we're not going to include that in the summation of the work in progress. Otherwise, we'll get, once we get a certain amount done, we can't do any more work in our workflow. All right, so we make that. What's step 5? Well, step 5 is your daily stand-up. All right, so let's see what this could look like. Let's make some examples here. We're gonna take our work in progress. Let's say, I've got 2 developers for implement. Actually, we're not even going to go there. Let's just say I'm going to put a implement here of 3, this of 1, and this of 2. I'm just going to make up some limits. All right. So what do you do? All right. Well, we got our handy dandy sticky notes. So let's envision that we had, story 1 put into the backlog, story 2. Of course, I would write proper titles on these if I was actually a real team, but they're here representing the stories, the features that need to be implemented. I almost guarantee you that instead of talking about stories at Microsoft, they talk about features. All right, very feature oriented. So how does it go? Well, you hold the daily stand-up, and the daily stand-up is all about pull. You're going to pull work. How does the daily stand-up work? Do people go stand around and say, what did I get done today? And what do I plan to do tomorrow? And what's my issues? No. Stand-up for Kanban is all about talking. You can do the pull or the pulls at the stand-up, or they can just be done on a regular basis. But let's just envision that they're done at the stand-up every day, which is people are basically, you're going to find out what has been done, and people will be signing up for things to do, all right, within reason. They're not going to talk about it. It's just we're going to move some cards. And then emphasis for the team is really to focus on, by looking at the board, where are things stuck? Where are things blocked? That's what the discussions focus on. You take away some to-do items. All right, these people are going to work. We're going to do the following changes to try to remove why it is things are not flowing through this properly right now and fix those blockages. So the stand-up turns into, let's just talk about what's stopping us from getting work done, and a lot less status reporting and stuff. You're going to update this through pulling the cards. I'll show you in a moment. But it's yeah, and that shift in the way the stand-up is run allows you to have a very big team doing Kanban, because most of the people don't actually have to be busy talking. Okay, you don't have to go, you can have 35 people in the room. We don't have to wait to hear every person talk. A small team, 2-pizza team, we're all working together. We're all trying to figure everything out. Probably very reasonable to have everyone talk. Once you want to scale Scrum up, it's a little weird. You start to see things talking about, oh, we're going to have Scrum of Scrums. So like one person from every Scrum team is going to go to another Scrum meeting. Yeah, I think Kanban scales massively better from everything that I can tell the way it works. Anyway, how does this work? Let's say we're starting fresh. So specify the amount of stuff that we're allowed to do. So the people in specify, whoever's working here goes, yeah, I have nothing in progress. Therefore, I can pull from the step to my left. So they go priority order here, and they pull this into there. Okay? And you're like, well, what do these other poor people get to do now? Because there's nothing for them. So the implement stage will pull from the done here. The validate stage will pull from the done here, but there's nothing yet to pull. So the people implementing and validating have no work to do. Well, there's always work to do in a company. You got to go check up on other stuff. These people, if it's a brand new project, are also, they're bringing up the repository. They're getting things in place. The testing people are getting things in place. Maybe, in fact, though, as we get to specify, these people are actually kind of helping. They're going to help out with doing the specifications. What else do we have to do? So we don't worry about people not having things to do too much. There's always stuff to do in a company. But this is us tracking the progress on the project and understanding what's happening. And so people in specify, they've got their one thing in progress, and their job is, again, to turn it into tasks. So I'm going to go task 1.1. So they turn this thing into, there's a task for story 1.1. This is just for us to keep track of it. 1.2, there's another thing to work on. It's not a small story at all. 1.3, 1.3, and just to be complete, we'll make there's four of these tasks here. All right, and basically the story moves along with it when it's been specified. Now, for counting work in progress for specify, we count the stories. We don't count all these little tasks here. So there's one story here done. These are all of its tasks. When we count stuff over work in progress for implement and validate, we're going to be counting all the little task cards. So for all intents and purposes, though, we could, if we wanted to, we just get rid of this guy and not worry about it right now. So we've got these tasks here. All right, so we have our stand-up the next day. Maybe the specify people got this all done in one day. All right, we look at this. And we start always on the right-hand side. Hey, can validate pull any work? No, nothing yet for validate to do. Can implement pull work? Oh, absolutely. They've got stuff sitting here in this done column, and they've got nothing in progress, so they can pull 3 items. All right. Now, does specify get to pull anything? The answer is there's really, we can say that story's still sitting there. The answer is no. Specify is not allowed to pull anything yet from the backlog. They still have something sitting in their done column, and their work in progress is limited to 1. So the people doing specify, these program managers, oh, they got to go do something else for a little while people get to work. What's the idea here? This is where we prevent the wastage. This is where we're not going to spec things out in advance. We don't want these just people to sit there and write specs nonstop and have a pile of specs. That's where wastage comes in. So they got to go do something else. All right, so the implement team gets to work. They get some tasks done. We have stand-up the next day. All right, we run stand-up. Hey, can validate pull any work? Hey, we can. There's 2 things done here. So they pull. Great. They're still working on this guy. Can they pull? Well, their work in progress limit. So you pull up to your work in progress limit. Oh, I could have 3 things. At the moment, I only have 1 thing actually in my work in progress. Again, that's why we have to start from the right. All right. So what can I pull? I'll pull this task. All right. Can I pull anything extra? No. I got 2 things to work on. Fine. All right. Specify. Can you pull? Hey, I'm all clear. It's time for me to get back to work. So I do this. Great. So again, let's pretend specify gets busy and they produce some, stand-up's over. We're going to produce some tasks now. Great. Make some tasks. Oh, I've been really busy. Great. All right, we hold stand-up again. Validate actually says that we got this done. And everyone asks them, well, what does that mean that you got it done? Oh, okay, we'll talk about that. Great, we agree that you have it done. So they get to move it to their done column. So now since this is not counted, they only have 1 thing in progress. So they could try to pull. Meanwhile, also implement got something done. All right, sorry. So you have to make sure that this represents thing. You have to have your done stuff done so that you can pull. Anyways, hey, we got this done. Great. So they pull this. For some reason, this task is actually taking a long time. They didn't get it done. All right, we could pull up to 2 things. All right, so we're going to go ahead and pull 2 things. And this had moved over. I'm sorry, this had moved over and lives here. Can they specify anything more? The answer is no. All right, people go, they update their work. These guys got really busy. They were able to validate everything. These guys got really busy. They actually got all these guys done. All right, then they run their stand-up. Oh, can I pull? Yeah, I can pull. All right. Ooh. Can I pull 3 things? No, I can only pull 2 things. But there's only 1 thing for me to pull. All right. That's all you can do. Then, oh, hey, I can go and I can specify a new task. So this is the basic idea. If you were to have a situation where, let's say the validate people were just always sitting around, they kept talking about we can't get anything. Why is everything stuck at implement? That's the discussion. What's going on implement? These tasks might be taking implement a really long time. So maybe we'll actually move someone from validate into implement to allow them to process work faster. Or in some flows, maybe the upstream ones are producing too much work at too fast of a rate. So that's when you start changing your work in progress limits. So I could constrain the specify people, not this one, it's that one, but if I had a higher amount of specification, I could constrain them to a lower work in progress and shift people or whatever elsewhere on the project, or I can go and ask for management to add more people to implement so that I can process things. I wouldn't increase its work in progress limit because it's having problems getting work flowing through it, but I could lower the upstream ones. This is the basic idea. So one of the questions is, what happens when validate says, we've been checking this out and there's a bug here? Well, they're not allowed to move it to the done column because it's not done, there's bugs. So the implement people are told, yeah, you got to go work and fix these bugs for us before we're able to make it done. That slows down their work here, all right, which then, because they won't pull any more work, people won't waste their time specifying or doing anything up the chain until these guys are ready for more work to be specified for them. So if these guys are producing bugs and these guys find them, that slows down their work, but that all naturally, we maintain an even flow and we don't waste effort on upstream items. Okay. Same thing goes if testing is stuck on things, it's just taking forever to figure out how to test them. Well, that means the people implementing are going to end up, they can't until validate pulls some stuff, they won't be able to work on anything. Oh, I can't work on anything more. Well, it means we don't pile up work for validate. We don't get out of sync with that. So maybe we shift some people, we change the work in progress limits, whatever we do, we work to solve the blockages in Kanban. All right, that's the basics of how do we implement Kanban. Pretty good. I like it. All right.